Good morning, everybody. It's Brian Caprice, and this is our Monday morning market breakdown. It is the week of July 15th. I can't believe it's the 15th already. This is kind of like the midpoint of like the middle of the year. So it's crazy how time is flying. So really excited to be with you guys this weekend. Voice is there. There was some lacrosse this weekend, guys, but I was playing, not coaching. So I can talk, but I just can't walk around real well today. So if you guys know what I mean. Old men playing young kids sports is always fun. With that being said, let's just jump right in today because we got some good stuff to talk about, and we had some good movement off of last week's 3 top news releases. So I want to make sure that we just talk about that and highlight those, even though it was a small news week. I actually like the news this week better than last week. They're more kind of historically proven news releases that we want to kind of get into. So just so you guys know who I am, if some of you are new out there, I don't get to see the list. I know some of you are repeat guys, and I really appreciate that. And some of you are new as well, but I'm the president and CEO of Keep Trading Simple, and our job as a company is to keep things absolutely simple and remove distractions from the market. In trading, there is way too many of them out there. Use this secret, and again, if you really keep things simple, we always talk about going back to the fundamentals with anything in life. That's what we attempt to do. And I've created a couple different strategies to do that that are particularly Nadex based. You guys may have seen webinars or heard about the 30-minute trader program or 5-minute binary courses that I've created. And they're meant for people on the go. I am not a believer in sitting in front of a computer for 18 hours a day. I'm a big believer in using technology, using charting, using things like alerts to let you know when price comes to a specific area. I'm not a huge indicator guy. I'm very much a price action reader. And again, it's about enjoying your life and using trading to get there. So I've taught people. I was in the in an advisory division of one of the big 3 banks, and did that for a short while and realized that everything you would think you do there, you don't actually do. So I left, and I've been teaching people how to trade the market since that time. Besides being a trader, I am definitely all about my family, my kids, my little baby. She's not little, she's 1 now, and she just started walking in the last week, so she's in that 5-step stumble thing. But that's my main focus and priority in life. But I love doing these presentations, and I love people, teaching people how to trade. So yeah, if you guys have questions or anything like that, I'll show you guys a slide at the end. You guys are more than welcome to email me about it as well. All right. So before we go into the content, let me go through the risk disclaimer. Now, trading on Nadex involves financial risk, and it may not be appropriate for all investors. The information presented here today is for information and educational purposes only and should not be considered an offer or solicitation to buy or sell any financial instrument on Nadex or elsewhere. Now, any trading decisions that you make are solely your responsibility. A past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results, and Nadex contracts are based on the underlying assets, including Forex, stock index futures, and commodity futures. Now, trading can be volatile, as you guys know, and investors risk losing their investment on any given transaction. However, the design of Nadex contracts ensures that investors cannot lose more than the cost to enter the transaction. Basically, whatever cost you to gain is the most you can lose. There's no such thing as a margin call with Nadex. Just make sure you guys understand that after you're new. Now, Nadex is subject to U.S. regulatory oversight by the CFTC. Okay, there are other exchanges out there. All the big exchanges they all have regulatory oversight. The CFTC just happens to be who is the U.S. regulatory oversight for Nadex. All right. So with that being said, let's dive into the top 3. Again, anybody new here, you guys will know that I kind of do almost kind of like a Letterman kind of countdown. But what I do is I pick the top 3 news releases during the week that I feel will give us the potential for the best trading setups. Okay, not saying that they are going to hit. We've been pretty lucky where most of them have hit over the last few weeks in a row. And again, one of the things about news is nobody has a crystal ball. Okay. There are different ways to play them, different strategies to play them. But these are the 3 that I feel that give us the biggest opportunity to be able to get trades out of them. Not that these miss more or anything, but these are the ones that, they tend to be, off slightly. You tend to get some movers and some retracers and, good trading setups. First one being Wednesday, July 17th at 9:30 p.m. Okay, a little bit later, right? Reason it's later is because it's Aussie news. Remember, the Aussie market is open basically in our U.S. time zone night, right? I have really, the last probably 6 months, I've absolutely loved the Aussie and New Zealand news releases, and even the Chinese news releases, because the movement has been great. It's only been one market open. You've been able to grab, anywhere from, say 40 to 50 pips on a trade, anywhere from, basically 2 to 2.5 strike prices on the daily and even smaller on the 2-hour binaries. So been some really great setup. Unemployment change, unemployment rate is a big number that really can move the markets. People focus on that a lot. When we talk about raising and lowering interest rates, and even just talking about what the state of the economy is, employment change and unemployment rate are two biggies. Okay, so those are some big ones, and there's no other news at the time, so all eyes will be on that, and it's a pure Aussie play. You have two different binary contracts. You have Aussie yen and Aussie dollar that you can go ahead and trade that with one. So that's going to be the top one that I'm looking for this week. Number 2 will be 8:30 a.m. tomorrow, and that'll be core retail sales and retail sales in the U.S. Retail sales is always good. I expect this number will be interesting. Now, it's month over month, so I know, this week all the talk will be about Prime Day. Everybody's about, oh, Prime. And so that will not be included in this number, obviously, but people will still be thinking that the two are associated together. And again, it's funny, I had to look up, I'm like, what really is Prime Day? And it's kind of just made up, it's a made up Black Friday, but I don't know, thus far I haven't found anything that's any different price than anything else. It's only for Prime members, right? So retail, core sales and retail sales will be month over month. And again, it will not include any of the Prime stuff, but again, typically is a big number about what the economy's doing. With everything with Powell talking last week and everything, and a lot of the reactions to it about, whether there's going to be cutting, whether it's going to be a one and done, is it going to be a double, so there's only one? I think this will be kind of the next kind of news push into that rate cut will be what this core retail sales number will be. So I think there's some good potential for that one. And then the next one, again, this is not the only 3, this is just my top 3, would be Friday, 8:30 a.m. CAD has basically the same thing. Okay, the Canadian dollar, their economy obviously is not as large. They are a little bit more sensitive to things, but they've had some pretty good numbers lately. So this could definitely be something that is worth it. Now, last week, CAD was one of the, I think that was our number 2 last week. There was some great kind of explosion. Basically news exploded it up. It retraced back down again, and then it retraced a second time. So it literally created like almost like a lightning bolt, and a lot of trading potential in those. And it was a nice little trade setup. Now, my cautionary tale this week. Last week, remember FOMC notes was kind of precautionary, but unfortunately, all eyes was just really not much of a mover for the actual notes because everybody was listening to Powell. This week, Powell is speaking at 1 o'clock, and he's made quite a name for himself in the last week with kind of his responses and the way that he handles things. So one thing is, if you have trades on Tuesday afternoon around 1 when he's speaking, just be very, very cautious. Okay. That would be a time to start protecting profits you have in, tighten up your stop losses, if you have them in there, and just make sure that you are protected. Because it is a speech, it does take some time to kind of roll in. It's not like a standard, what we're used to news release where they're releasing a number or a percentage or some type of data point. That doesn't happen with a speech. So they're a little bit harder to trade, but just be a little bit cautious because, again, 1 p.m. on Tuesday, Powell speaking, and all eyes are on him, and anything that he speaks about right now, it's going to be like, what's the rate cut? Is it going to be 1? Is it going to be 2? When is it going to be? Going to be interesting. All right. So with that said, let's go over to Daily FX. If you guys are not familiar with this website, let me drag this over here. All right. So Daily FX has all kinds of neat, really cool. It's got so many tools. It's got so much stuff on there, and it talks about binaries. There's different trading strategy. News over here. I like the economic calendar. For me, that's kind of where I use most of my planning at, or do most of my planning at. And first thing first, when you guys get over here, if you haven't used it, go over here and change the time because that can mess people up first off. Change your time to where you're currently located, and then jump into filters because we don't need all this information. You obviously don't need the lows. I leave the mediums. Sometimes on other websites like Forex Factory is another website. Sometimes things will be marked high there, but they're medium here. And again, that's just kind of preference of the website. I also remove the Mexican peso, but I do leave China up there. The reason I leave China up there is because Chinese news will typically move the New Zealand dollar and the Aussie dollar. Okay. So once these two are checked, hit close, hit weekly view, and you're off to the races. Okay. All right. So here we go. So you guys can see. Obviously, Sunday night is when is Monday morning here, and you can see a bunch of this news is already moved. Again, if you guys didn't know, there is actually something that you guys can trade in the Chinese market up on Nadex. A lot of people don't know that or even look into it, but it's another reason why you leave Chinese news up here. But going into Monday, where we are right now, you guys can see that we have a New Zealand Consumer Price Index later on today, later on tonight. This will affect the Aussie a little bit, but probably more so, it's probably better suited for, say, a currency trade than it is Nadex. This morning, really all we have is the Canadian existing home sales. This is an interesting number. If you guys have been following, my wife is Canadian. She's from Vancouver. They have a very interesting scenario there where they're trying to crash their housing market because it's gotten so out of hand with overseas money, people wanting to invest outside of China, that people are just coming over and paying things with cash. And unfortunately, the locals really can't afford much anymore. And it's a big problem. It's kind of a bubble, but it's nowhere close to popping. And, an example being like a duplex on, a little tiny piece of property, each side is $920,000, where I live in Maryland, I've been on the East Coast. That same property here would be worth like $150,000. So, and that's 920 in Canadian. So over $1 million for a duplex on a very, very tiny lot, the size of like a 2-car garage. So it's gotten quite out of hand up there. So interesting number to watch. Again, it's not going to be a huge market mover typically. Again, for the most part, Monday is kind of a shy day. People are recovering from the weekend. Now going into Tuesday. Tuesday has given us some nice potential though. A lot of stuff. If you guys are West Coaster or if you guys are overseas, or you're an East Coaster that wakes up super early, a lot of GDP noise, right? Again, on the front page of Daily Effects, you guys will see there's actually talking about how this is one of the most shorted stocks. When everybody is shorting, guess what's going to happen? You're going to see some strength in it because, to keep shorting things, somebody's got to be willing to, take the other side of that trade. And eventually, the balance tips there, right? So a lot of news tomorrow morning. Again, tonight, tomorrow morning, depending on how you look at it. Then we jump in early on and we have some Eurozone news, and it's all considered high, right? Expectations, always a big deal. And then again, when you have the BOE speaking, that could be a big deal, right? These, they're in Paris. Anything that they talk about Brexit or any certainty with Brexit, again, that could be a big mover for the pound. That could finally give us the movement that we've been looking for to the downside. Okay. Starting, and then again, that's at 8. That's right before our market opens, so that's kind of an interesting time, right? At 8:30, we start jumping in. So there may be a little bit of a carryover trade here because if we get some pound news here, and then we start going, these numbers are bad, the pound dollar could be on the plate because we kind of have dual news releases. And you guys look, there's a lot of stuff going on at 8:30, right? All the retail sales, the export data. Then at 9:15, we start jumping in with industrial, production, right? So there's a chock full of stuff. There's a whole bunch of stuff Tuesday morning. And then again, Powell starts speaking. Now, this is the France dinner in Paris. It's the same thing that, Carney's at. But again, anything that he says about international trade, trade war with Europe, anything like that, that could be something that's starting to move the market. So again, just be cautious of those types of things. All right. And then long-term Tiff data, not a big deal. Going into Wednesday, okay. Again, here's what we mentioned about, one of the other possible releases. Okay, this kind of a big deal, right? CPI data is important, okay, particularly with the pound. Again, this is a pound kind of heavy week. Going to the Eurozone, again, more medium data. Then we jump down, and here's where we talk about the consumer price index, okay? CPI is a big thing. Whenever we talk about inflation, it's supposed to be less than before. But again, this is kind of a preliminary inflation number, okay? Whenever you're talking about rates rising or lowering, this is one of the first things that they look at. So again, very, very important. And you can see the U.S. data to kind of counterbalance it isn't that strong. It's housing starts and building permits. We'll see how it goes. For me, this is, you're going to see a pure CAD play here. Okay. 10:30, you have a little bit of crude oil, right? Again, every single week at the same time, except when Monday's a holiday or Tuesday's a holiday, then it gets pushed back. You have your crude oil inventories. Okay. So again, if you are a commodities person or you like commodities, or, and I say or, if you are a futures trader but you are scared to trade oil, jump over into Nadex and trade it here. Okay, you can trade commodities, trade binaries on crude oil. It's very, very cheap compared to what it costs you over on the future side. Okay, that night we talk about the employment change and the unemployment rate in the Aussie. Okay, very, very, very important. And look, there's nothing else at that time. It's only the Aussie market open. Great chance for a nice little mover. Okay. Going into Thursday. Okay. Then you can see that we have, again, this is marked as a high. Bank liabilities and credit condition survey. it's one of those things that I don't really pay too much attention to it. So again, I wouldn't wake up early this morning just to trade that one. And again, we have a bunch of medium U.S. news. Initial jobless claims are good. Continuing claims are good. Again, these are going to be more kind of Dow-based, indices-based kind of trade things. Something, if there's nothing else going on that day, this is what the new, this is what CNBC and MSNBC will be talking about. All right, going into Friday. Okay, here's the biggie right here. Okay, now we do have University of Michigan consumer sentiment. This one can be, but they don't really miss the number too much. It's pretty much forecast in. You don't see too many misses here. But again, retail sales can be a big one month over month. Okay, this could really affect the Canadian dollar. You can see there's no other U.S. dollar that early in the morning to kind of counterbalance it as well. So again, these are going to be like a 1-2 punch on Friday morning. So just be a little bit cautious about that. The borrowing and things like this for the pound, again, these are not huge movers in the pound. We'll kind of see how it goes out. But again, I think CAD is the biggest tradable one, followed by consumer sentiment. But this one, again, like I said, is not typically a miss. All right. So with that being said, let's jump over into the charts. All right. So last week, let me get one more piece up. All right. So last week we were starting to get pretty excited, right? Last week was the 8th. Okay, so that brings us back to right here. And you can see we were starting to breach the bottom, and we're getting to the point where it's kind of like, are we finally out of this kind of magnet of an area? Okay, the answer is, well, as of Tuesday, we're like, yes, we've broken through the bottom. Maybe it's time we're going to start retracing back down to that 74.50 area, right? Because that's always a bottom target. And you can see we drew this area, and again, there's our target of where we're hoping for it to go. But it needed to breach. And you guys remember this blue line? What I should do is, I think I'll start doing this going forward. I'm going to start changing the alert lines to like a yellow, okay? So you guys can kind of see them. So this was our alert line. And again, we were using technology. If we were able to break the bottom side of this kind of buy and sell zone, that was going to be our trigger, or at least we were going to look on our lower time frames to start going short. Well, that's not what happened. It ended up bouncing off the same previous demand zone, and it kind of bounced, right? And we basically formed this kind of channel sideways with sellers up top and buyers, okay? Price came down, and again, if you look right here, we got sucked right back up in, went right off this top area again, and then pushed down. The difference was here, there was no buyers. In this uptrend, you had buyers right here, this wick against, this little wick against this kind of candle body, and that's what it did. It hit and kind of, went sideways again. And again, we've pulled back into the zone right now, but again, we're still on the larger time zone. Now, if you guys have ever heard me talk about racetracks and Sunday night gaps, this is the absolute definition of a Sunday night gap. And I think we're going to plan a webinar in the future to talk about these called Parabolic Retracements. This is basically the pure definition of a parabolic retracement, right? We have a large gap, immediately just rocket ships up and then turns and goes all the way back down to the start of the move and fills it. Where we are right now, again, you guys can see that, the descending tops, right? The lows are more or less lower besides this kind of spike back down again. Price is really just kind of pushing back to where it was on Friday. Most likely, depending on how the U.S. market opens, that's probably what we'll see, is this market kind of retracing back down. I would assume back down to this figure, but you're only talking about a 10-15 pip run, so I'd be a little bit cautious in any binaries that I throw in this one. Looking at the larger time frames, one of the things that I mentioned before, we really need to figure out where trend is going. And you guys can see we've really been consolidated, and I can really, I can extend this to the right even more if you want. We've been stuck with inside of this channel. Okay, it's very, very small, and it's very, very whipsaw back and forth. Now, one of the things that I will be, and again, I'm all about transparency. One of the problems that I do have, and again, this is just options across the board, not specific to Nadex, is you do have expirations. So when you have kind of times like this, putting on longer term trend or longer term trades can be a problem, just because sometimes we get expired out of it, right? On the lower time frames, this is where the action has been with this one, but it's still taking, a day and a half. So you need to be very, very cautious in what you're doing. With a longer out strike, a longer duration binary, the strikes are wider apart. So there's where we need to be a little bit careful. So you may have to kind of swap into some of the shorter term, maybe even like daily spreads, because that way, again, this is one of the things I love about spreads, is it's not an all or nothing like a binary. It can tick down in your favor. And again, you can get some of these explosions where in 12 hours it moves 40, 50 pips. But again, if you use some, an out of the money binary, 40, 50 pips may have been exactly where you needed to be, and it may just pop up, right? So again, you need to, select the correct aspect, okay? And again, you have touch brackets as well. They last a little bit longer. Again, 3 different ways that you can kind of go at these things, particularly with, retraces and bounces. These are great little things, especially on the weekend, right? When you get these pops. So for me on this one, I'm really looking for this to kind of retrace back down again, start to pick up some momentum. I want to see if we can hold. When this candle closes, if we start to go to the downside and we're starting to show lower highs, again, I'm probably going to start looking for some type of sell in this area for something short term, maybe like a 2-hour binary. There's about 30 pips from here down into kind of where the previous area of buyers are. So if I can get something on the small side, maybe, double, that's probably what I'm going to be looking at. All right. For me, the Aussie dollar, let's switch to that right now. This has been a better one. Again, this one has had a little bit more movement, and you guys will see. And as I mentioned, I'm very transparent about things as well. We talked about this price coming down, coming up and retesting, and then shooting back to the downside. And it actually did. It actually has rallied up pretty well. We had these 4, and again, these I did not put these circles for you. This is a different webinar that I was doing. But you'll see we had multiple breaks. So I was not surprised that we had the break here, but I am surprised that we ended up bouncing through it to the top side. Okay, again, that's why I had this here. And I wanted to leave this here because, again, sometimes your analysis is not correct. And mine wasn't. I thought we were going to hit up and head back down again. We ended up getting a nice impulse, a nice correction, a nice impulse, ran into this level, and then we kind of ended back up in there before the weekend. Okay, and again, you'll see we pulled up. And again, this is another example of kind of a Sunday, kind of a, again, this is a very typical setup, right? Up, retest, and then go higher. So we're at the top of the range now, and this is on kind of 2 different charts, okay? On the daily, it did turn where I expected we were going to run into a speed bump, and I had mentioned that before. What I mean by that is you guys see this wick against the wall here. That's an area of buyers, okay? It's hidden. You can't see it on all charts, but on a daily, you can see it. It goes right there. And that's exactly what we ran into. So I knew we were going to have a problem with this. I was hoping that it would retrace back up, grab these, and continue down, and it didn't do that. It ended up going back higher. Again, if you were into from the top or from the start of the blue area when we had confirmation, you didn't lose any money on the trade. But again, prices rallied back up. We're up into this top buying area right now, right? That's kind of where we are, and you're seeing price starting to base sideways. Again, when US traders come online, we'll see if we can get some dollar strength back in here. Wouldn't necessarily be surprised with that. Again, we're starting to kind of push down towards a lower low. And again, you see that there's a gap here, and we could potentially see price push back down. So for me on this one, these are still 2 areas. I'll mark it this way. Here's an area right up here that I'm kind of looking for. We're not quite there yet, and that's where this last time just barely pierced the zone. This pullback, right? This impulse, correction, and pullback. Again, nice little area as far as reading price action, and that's what we're approaching. So probably going to look for a little bit higher, look for a confirmation on one of these 2 time frames, and for me, most likely short. And I'm looking to probably take it back down to this area. So you're talking about 35, 40 pip run. Again, once US traders come online, some of the 2-hour binaries start to get really, really attractive, really, really nice at this level. All right. I'll adjust these later. Let's go down to Euro Pound. So Euro Pound, if you guys, I didn't talk about this too much. I did this with my group. So we've really been in this channel going upwards, right? If you guys look, right, we had a very fast ascent off this buying zone, right? This daily buying zone, and we went straight up. And then we started kind of bouncing back and forth. Now, I'm not a big price guy. I'm not a big trend line, but I will use them to look to see what other traders are thinking about, okay? And when I marked this off last week, what I said was, the way that this is kind of going fast here, but now, on the kind of the top side of this channel, now it's starting to go on the bottom side. And what most likely happens there is, again, we were talking last week. Remember, we did we drew the different trend lines, and we talked about how it was starting to slump and starting to kind of create like a fan to the side. Well, what happens is now it's starting to go sideways through the actual trend lines, right? We have a trend break, right, and it's pulling back and it's trying its best. But this is according to, go to Daily FX and they'll talk about this. There's an article up top, it's great. It talks about how the pound is the most shorted currency right now, okay? If everybody in the world is shorting, how do you make money on it, right? Basically what's gonna happen is when there's nobody else left to short, the price will start to move and then all those shorts will start losing money, okay? Because remember, in trading, to buy something, somebody has to be willing to sell it. And for you to sell it or to short it, what does somebody have to be willing to do? They have to be willing to buy it. And if it's the most shorted, everybody in the world is shorting, who's dumb enough to be buying this? Typically, that's the smart money, the big money, when they know something about, where certain, where this something's going to happen. All right, so I am definitely waiting for this. I keep mentioning it. It hasn't happened yet. We're starting to see things break sideways through. Another interesting way that you can do this is you look at Bollinger Bands. We were bouncing off the top side, and again, there's another thing that people can look at. I don't necessarily, I use them sometimes, but not that often. It was bouncing off the top side of the Bollingers. Now it's bouncing off the bottom side, starting to break. So again, we are kind of, again, with Monday, we're stuck here. We're kind of inside of kind of a box right here, right? We kind of have this box. Again, the box it's about 40 pips. So, I mean, there's a little bit of movement in there. But, again, let's wait for let's wait till the U.S. Economy comes online and see if they have a say in either of these two things. And you can see we're up at this level of basing where there was an explosion before. We'll see if we can start getting that kind of pop to the downside. And again, this play would be euro weakness would send this down, or any type of pound strength would send this pair to the downside. Okay, so that's kind of what we're looking for there. Let's drop down and look at euro yen. So euro yen, we talked last week that we were stuck in the middle of this box. Here, whoops, hold on, wait for it to fully load. Okay, the 8th is right here. Okay, and again, early on, we were right here, and price is basically right there. Here's the same box. So we did get some movement. We did get a push up. And again, this is pure price action, right? We went to this level of basing. Price dropped, went sideways, and then dropped. It came back up, hit, dropped, hit the base, went back up again, grabbed more, and then pushed in again. It's stuck back down at this level. So this is what I'm talking about when we want people to come online. We want some momentum, want some pushing to start happening. This is what happened, right? We had pure sideways, right? It was doing nothing. We finally got a little bit of life, kind of came up and went to an area where we saw sellers, and that's where we had some movement. So the trade was here, back up, and back down again. And now we're just waiting for it to kind of reinvigorate and let us know where it's going to move next, right? At this point, we have breached the bottom of the zone. We spent a lot of time here. We've been through the zone 3 times. I don't know that this zone will hold again to the downside. We may be looking at a short to take this back down to the 121 area. Okay, and again, that would be euro weakness. And again, even looking over here, you guys can see down. Here's the basing, down, and it came up. Pretty nice ascent, right? Nothing, 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 nothing. Power into an area of sellers. Boom, right back down to the start of the move. Okay, so, and again, 1, 2, 3. It's a little bit higher, but I think if we can get a push through, I think we can start heading back to the downside, back down to the 121. Okay, looking at euro dollar. So, euro dollar. Euro dollars is one of those ones where we got into it. We were looking to go short out the bottom side, and it really kind of flaunted with us. This was not something that I drew for you guys. It was something that I drew, I believe, Tuesday or Wednesday of last week. Actually, maybe, you know what? That would have been on Thursday. And we mentioned if it kind of drops in, look for this to come down, but protect yourself to set this one up. So what we were doing is we were using this yellow as kind of a trigger. Actually, we wanted this trigger to be a little bit lower. Actually, that trigger should have been here. And again, we were right here last week, right inside of this zone. Okay, and we said if we got back up, and again, we drew this, if we got back up, we were going to be looking to go short again. And that's what happened. It came all the way back up, it triggered our sell, and then kind of pushed back down again. Now, it was very, very small risk. This was like a 3-to-1 trade for the bottom. And what we're doing is we were looking to kind of, take advantage of kind of some of the movement that we saw here. And again, that's what we did. We had a very fast drop down, but there was a level of basing, okay? And we said, here's a level of basing, we need to get some confirmation, but we never got it. And it went high, and we eventually got it over in here. So again, the risk was very, very tiny on this one. I think originally, what was it? And again, even though Nadex is set up a little bit different, you should always know this. So this had about 7 pips risk, and we were looking for it to move 50, just under 3 strike prices on a daily. But again, this all happened within about an 8-hour period of time. So you could have timed your binary in this one to the downside with your inherent risk. So even though you got in here, you may say, okay, it's up in this level. We're not quite there yet, right? Price may have gone a little higher. And once it collapsed below this level, you could have got into your binary trade. Again, taking less risk because of the inherent nature of Nadex. Whatever it costs you to get in is all your risk is. If the price went all the way up, you still would have only lost what you paid to get into this one, right? You could have, again, from here down to here, you had just under 2 strike prices. So definitely some movement on the 2-hour, and that's on the daily. Using some of the 2 hours and even the smaller ones, you may have been able to grab that even a little easier. And again, there are 2-hour spreads. You guys could have grabbed this to the downside. So couple nice little ways that, to trade these things. All right, where we are right now, again, looking at this on the daily, you guys can see we have descending wicks right here. Typically, when we have descending wicks, I'm looking for sellers. We've seen price pop up, go back down, came up, and is being pushed back down again. Looking on the 4-hour, you can see we hit this kind of, what is it, the 112.80 area, which is a kind of a signal of where we're looking to go short and things, or starting to look for trade setup to the downside. That's what we're seeing over here as well. So for me as well, again, this is another story where we're talking about euro weakness. So it's very similar. Euro pound at an area where I'm looking to go short, selling, basically going against the euro. Euro yen, kind of a similar scenario. Here, kind of a similar scenario where we're seeing it more set up to the downside. So again, you want to kind of keep track of those things and find the best opportunity for your individual situation. Going down and looking at pound yen. So interesting thing about pound yen. So pound yen was another one. Right here is where we were last week. Okay, and we're basically right there. So it has not moved much. It's flatlining out. If it wasn't for this big candle here and these two little ones, this ATR would be even smaller. It's down to 81. Okay. During Brexit, it was up at 160 pips per day. Now it's down to 80. It's down to half. Doesn't mean there's not movement. It's just you're seeing less and less on the daily. So what we saw over here, again, these are some of the trades. I extend this out. Right here is where we were last week. I'll move that here. Right here is on the 8th. So this is where we were, and we talked about being a little bit of an, kind of a no man's land. We wanted to get kind of direction up or down. We ended up going up a bit higher, and what we did is we created a little bit of a base and pop area. It's a little hard to see on this one, but you guys can see there's a wick over wick here. And that kind of established where we were for the rest of the week. One of the disadvantages we have on Monday morning is the fact that there are not U.S. traders in there. There's not big money there yet. What happened later in the week, big money stepped in, okay? Price got driven down. It did not make a new low, and then it started to push back up again, which meant it was looking for more sellers, okay? It rallied back up. It went back to the same area where we saw previous basing. It hit, boom, went down, and it did create a lower low, okay? Then, based off of news, what happened? Boom, this thing shot right back up again and stopped right at where this area of sellers was. That was another way for us to short. It was about 80 pips back down to the downside. The risk on this one was rather small. You guys can see from here to here, you're talking about 10 pips. So even in currencies, it was small. All right. With Nadex, it was again very, very similar. Now, here's one thing I liked about this one, and it's a shame it didn't happen earlier in the week. But if you guys look at your touch brackets, again, you'll see this in a second. This pair is not in the touch brackets, but pound dollar is. Okay, and this one will, is very similar to what happens here. But it's things like this. If there was a touch bracket for this one and you have a large spike, this is how you start to play those things. Top to bottom, again, 80 pips is a nice run. Again, play this one with spreads. This is a great one to play with spreads, but also with a little bit farther out of the money binaries. You guys can see where it is. Now, we are at a low section, and we're kind of at a, I'm not going to say a line in the sand, but again, we've already made one lower low, but we've seen ascending kind of wicks on the bottom of these candles, meaning that there are buyers somewhere down here. So I'm actually expecting somewhat of a retrace this morning. We still got a little bit to go. You guys can see on the 30-minute here on the right-hand side, here's where the first kind of pullback is, and that's kind of where we're at right now. I'll draw a box so you guys can see it. Okay, here is the area of buyers. That's what we've kind of pinged off of. So I'm going to see if we can grind through this. Again, we have a lower section right below, and then we're going to, then it kind of matters. If I was going to set an alert for this one, I would put an alert somewhere like here, actually right around where the low is. I want to know where the low is, not as a kind of market order to get in. I want to see what the formations look like. I want to see if there's somewhat of a pullback right above this area. This is going to be a big trap for support and resistance traders because it's a new low, okay? Support and resistance traders are going to see this and be like, yep, I'm getting short. Typically, when everybody's trying to get short, you will see a pop in price. And if you can get it cheaper at a pullback like this, that's the way to do it. That's where you want to get in. So that's what I'm going to be looking for. So I will mark this in yellow just as a kind of telltale sign to say, hey, this is where you probably want to, come back to your computer and kind of see what it's setting up as. All right. Looking at the pound dollar. Let it load. Okay. So here you go. You can see with the pound dollar. Same kind of thing. We had that basing level. It was easier to see here. And again, price popped up, went back down. And now this one's really been following just kind of a recipe in the way that it moved. And again, a couple of my students asked, well, why not here? Well, yes, this was a trade setup. But again, it was not because, again, also we saw a bunch of buyers right below you. Typically, when you're going to be looking to buy or sell, you want to make sure that there's enough room for the trade to run. There's nothing worse than being able to pick saying, hey, up, there's the top, there's the bottom, there's an area where it's going to flip, but you just don't have any room to run, and it goes down, grabs some more orders, and then blows through your area. So this was the first good area based off of what we saw, and it did. It kind of played ping pong. Here's your area of sellers, went straight down. Grab your areas of buyers, went right back up again, and now it's peeling back down again, just like we saw in the pound yen. We also saw this one off of the daily, okay? I talked about this with my group on, I guess, Thursday night, maybe? And we talked about this being an area, and it was very hard to see, right? This little basing level, there's 3 wicks to the downside, descending, and what we've done is we've bounced off this area and have, shot right back down again, since the market opened. And again, there's your daily zone, pretty nice. I mean, it's bouncing off of you're seeing it on all 3 kind of sections. And again, this is one of those ones. If you guys, I don't know if you guys know this. I mean, we're in 43 pips already. This is one of those trades you can start taking Sunday night. Okay, markets are open. Nadex is starting to come online. You can get in there and put these trades on. I have students every Sunday night that get together, and what they do is they trade Sunday night setups, and it came right off of this one. So we're currently in a downtrend. We'll see what happens when the U.S. comes online. Again, what we're seeing here is we're seeing pound weakness now to the downside, and we're seeing dollar strength. Just like we talked about in some of the other pairs, we're looking for more dollar strength to come in, and that's what we're seeing. Let's go down and look at dollar CAD. Okay, so dollar CAD, you can see it was whipping back and forth. This was something we used from earlier. Okay, we're kind of at a base here, right? We've seen this kind of sideways pattern. It came up, it went down, it went up and went down, and really is blown through this kind of level. We had this marked off. Okay, if we move this up, you can see that we had the sellers here. Okay, it went down. Here was your impulse, correction, impulse, correction, impulse. The correction came back up again. Now it has hit twice. Okay, because it went up, came down, and is now pushed lower. But when we look lower, this is what we have on the 4-hour chart. Okay, it's really kind of flatlined to the bottom side. I think we're going to need some. I don't even know if Monday's kind of U.S. traders are going to be able to move this one too much. I'm not expecting a very, very big day in this one without any news. I think tomorrow there will be a bit more. We'll have a bit more action in this one. Like I said, there's more U.S. data tomorrow morning. I think that U.S. data will help drive this figure. Unless there's any news releases or tweets or something like that, I just don't think there's enough potential today to really kind of move it much, right? Even if you look right now, like 24-hour pip changes, you're looking at basically 0 on this one. This is kind of the most flat currency pair right now. And again, neither one of these is trading, but they'll be online soon. Looking at the overall picture of this one, again, I still think it's trying to find some orders here. You can see, it moved from 135 kind of pretty consistently, right? Minus this pullback for more orders to the downside, all the way back down to 130s. But now it's starting to have a little bit more, you're seeing the price, this is pretty big swings, but now it's getting a little bit choppier. I'm hoping we're not going to get back into something like this where it just stalls. Again, looking at this here, you can see we kind of in a box, but we're on the very, very downside. So got to see if this is going to break. Again, if you're going to use a trigger, use 130 as your trigger. It's a big round number, so price will act as a magnet to pull this down, but we'll see what it's going to do. There's just not enough movement to determine whether or not we're going to have a trend when the U.S. traders come online. Areas I am looking, though, for selling. This wick was so funky. This little kind of down spike into an area of buying, right back up again, and then pulled back down. This is that kind of V I was talking about. You guys can see it right here. Okay, this is why I love news trading so much. Okay, this is a 30-minute chart. So it took 30 minutes to go down, an hour and a half to go all the way back up again, and then it took a little bit more time here to head back to the downside. Okay, and again, we're talking about, that was an 80 pip run. We're talking about 64 pips. Okay, we're going to do an upcoming webinar on this one, but these type of news moves are literally my favorite. They're called Parabolic Retracements, and the reason why is because, with a 2-hour binary, the difference between the different binaries is only 7 pips, right? So you get a couple binaries, you get a couple kind of strike prices down, it gets pretty cheap. Well, you get something like this that retraces, 60, 70 pips, and they're only 7 apart. You're jumping 6, 7 strike prices. There's a lot to go here. And again, we can't predict this red, but you can kind of retrace it from here or retrace it back down again based off how the candles are formed. So that's why CAD is one of the ones I definitely like to trade. That's why I like the Aussie news, because you see these all the time, okay? And that's kind of what we're looking for. Okay, so I want to get some momentum. You guys can see it's just basically flatline. We need these guys to come online before we can do anything. Dollar Swiss. Dollar Swiss, again, has been punching back through. We had a bit of a basing level and a retest, and again, it retraced back down again. We are pushing a little bit lower. I am looking for and kind of have alerts set down here at this 97 area. Again, that's the initiation of the gap, and here's the second one. So I think price will push back down again. For me, it's going to be a little bit slow with no news today. Again, it won't be something I look at, probably going later in the week. And last but not least, we have the dollar yen. Dollar yen drove from our top zone all the way back down. It popped, it grabbed more orders here, and then drove back down again, and then just has stopped at this bottom buying level. Not ready to go long, not ready to go short. If anything, I'm probably a little bit more bullish at this point, looking for an uptrend based off of what we see on the daily. This pullback, right, impulse correction, this pullback has two candles in it, ascending wicks, and then a large explosion out of it. So I am probably a little bit more bullish at this point, but I'm not willing to just jump into it right now. I want to see kind of how it turns on Monday morning. Again, we are at the bottom level. We are in basing. We actually do have a confirmation, a green, red, green to the top side, but it's right into an area where we have sellers. So again, want to see how this one comes online. I think this will be a good pair to trade tomorrow, because I think that core retail sales and the retail sales number, as well as Powell speaking tomorrow, that's going to move the stock market, and this is a proxy. This one will move around as well. All right. So with that being said, guys, that is the end of the kind of chart segment here. If you guys have any questions for me about what we talked about, these are how you get in touch with us. You can go to keeptradingsimple.com. If you're on Instagram, you'll see different of these chart setups that I put up. We are on Facebook now as well. It's a new profile. At Twitch, we talk about these setups. You can join us on Discord, or you can just email me at support@keeptradingsimple.com. Those are the best ways to get in touch with me. With that being said, guys, I will see you guys the same time next week. And I appreciate it. Good trading this week. Stay safe, and have a wonderful week. Take care.